Billionaire promises 10 million in French to humiliate the maid's 8-year-old daughter until she replies fluently in French, leaving everyone shocked. Before we start, let's create a wave of positivity. If you'd like, share a word that describes how you're feeling today. Please like this video and follow our channel if you want to be part of our community. $10 million if anyone at this table can make this little girl say a single word in French. The crystal chandelier light flickered across William Sterling's smug face as he gestured toward 8-year-old Emma Wilson, who stood frozen beside her mother, Janet, the housekeeper. 30 pairs of eyes turned to stare at the child in her simple blue dress, utterly out of place among Newport's elite, gathered for the Sterling's annual charity gala. Monsieur Sterling offers quite the incentive, non? François Dubois, the French ambassador, commented with a raised eyebrow, though perhaps inappropriate to place a child in such a position. William's laughter echoed through the vast dining room of his clifftop mansion. My dear François, I'm merely making a point about the importance of proper education, something clearly lacking in certain circles. His eyes flicked dismissively toward Janet, who stood rigid in her black uniform, hands trembling slightly as she continued serving wine. "Mother, this is exceedingly distasteful," whispered Catherine Sterling, William's 26-year-old daughter who had returned from Paris just yesterday. Her father silenced her with a sharp glance. Emma's cheeks burned crimson as the wealthy guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. Janet had only brought her daughter because the regular babysitter had cancelled last minute, and Mr. Sterling had reluctantly permitted it, provided Emma stayed in the kitchen. But when the child had accidentally wandered into the dining room looking for her mother, William had seized the opportunity for cruel entertainment. "Well," William prompted, slicing into his filet mignon. "Nothing to say, little one, not even a simple bonjour. Your mother has worked in my home for nearly 6 years. One would think you might have absorbed something useful in that time." The grandfather clock in the corner ticked loudly, marking each excruciating second of silence. Emma's eyes filled with tears as she stared at the intricate pattern of the Persian rug beneath her feet. "William, that's quite enough," Elizabeth Sterling finally intervened, placing her napkin beside her barely touched plate. "The child is clearly uncomfortable. Discomfort is often the precursor to growth, my dear," William replied smoothly. "I'm offering a fortune that could change their lives forever. Surely that's worth a moment of social awkwardness." Janet moved to retrieve her daughter, but William raised his hand. Your employment contract specifies you're on duty until midnight, Janet. We wouldn't want a breach of terms, would we?" Emma's small fists clenched at her sides. Something shifted in her expression as she lifted her gaze to meet William Sterling's cold blue eyes. "Je n'ai pas besoin de votre argent, Monsieur Sterling," Emma said, her pronunciation flawless. "Votre cruauté révèle seulement la pauvreté de votre âme." The room fell into stunned silence. William's fork clattered against fine china. "I don't need your money, Mr. Sterling," Emma continued in English. "Your cruelty only reveals the poverty of your soul." She turned and walked with perfect posture toward the kitchen door, leaving 30 of Newport's wealthiest citizens frozen in astonishment. "Well," François Dubois finally broke the silence, his voice tinged with admiration. "It appears you owe this child $10 million, William." 3 days had passed since the dinner party, and Janet Wilson hadn't slept more than 2 hours each night. Her modest apartment above Mrs. Henderson's garage in the less fashionable part of Newport felt suffocating as she paced the worn carpet. "Mom, you're making me dizzy," Emma said, looking up from her book. "Mr. Sterling isn't going to give us the money. You know that, right?" Janet sank onto their threadbare couch. "How did you do it, Emma? Where did you learn to speak French like that?" Emma shrugged, avoiding her mother's gaze. "Books, videos. I listen to people." "That wasn't just phrases, sweetheart. You spoke in perfect sentences, with an accent Francois Dubois himself complimented. A knock at the door interrupted them. Janet's heart thundered in her chest as she peered through the peephole. Her breath caught. "It's Catherine Sterling," she whispered to Emma. When Janet opened the door, Catherine stood there in casual designer clothes that probably cost more than 3 months of Janet's salary. "May I come in?" she asked, uncharacteristically hesitant. Janet nodded, acutely aware of their modest surroundings, as Catherine entered. "Emma," Catherine smiled warmly at the girl. "I wanted to personally apologize for my father's behavior. It was unforgivable." "Is he going to fire my mom?" Emma asked directly. Catherine blinked, taken aback by the child's forthrightness. "No, in fact, that's partly why I'm here." She placed an envelope on the coffee table. "This isn't 10 million. But it's a check for $50,000 from my personal account." Janet gasped. "Miss Sterling, we can't possibly—" "Please," Catherine raised her hand. "Call me Catherine, and yes, you can accept it. Consider it compensation for years of difficult working conditions." She turned to Emma. "But I'm more interested in how you learned to speak French so beautifully." Emma hesitated, then retrieved a worn library card from her pocket. "The Newport Public Library has a language section. Mrs. Patterson, the librarian, lets me use the computers for the online courses." "Every Tuesday and Thursday after school," Janet added, pieces finally falling into place. "Emma said she was doing homework with friends." "I was doing homework," Emma protested. "Just different homework." Catherine studied the child with newfound respect. "My father built his empire starting with nothing. He forgets that sometimes." She leaned forward. "Emma, I run the Sterling Educational Foundation. We offer scholarships to exceptional students. Would you be interested?" Emma's eyes widened, but then narrowed suspiciously. "Is this because you feel sorry for me?" Catherine laughed, a genuine sound rarely heard in the Sterling mansion. "No. It's because we look for precisely your kind of intelligence and determination, but there's something else you should know." Her expression grew serious. "My father isn't done with this situation. He doesn't like to lose." "What does that mean?" Janet asked, her momentary relief evaporating. "It means," Catherine replied carefully, "that while I've convinced him not to fire you, he's become obsessed with proving Emma's French abilities were somehow a fluke. He's talking about a proper examination at his upcoming business gala next month." Emma's small face hardened with determination. "Let him try." William Sterling's office overlooked the Atlantic Ocean, waves crashing against the cliffs below his Newport estate. He swirled 18-year-old scotch in a crystal tumbler as thunder rumbled in the distance. "Explain to me again how an 8-year-old housemaid's daughter speaks fluent French," he demanded, not bothering to look at Lawrence Peters, his head of security. Peters shifted uncomfortably. "The preliminary background check shows Janet Wilson studied at Rhode Island College before dropping out when she became pregnant. She took some French courses, but nothing advanced. And the girl? Emma attends Newport Elementary. Their language program doesn't begin until 5th grade. She's in 3rd. William set down his glass with deliberate control. "So we have a mystery. Sir, with all respect, perhaps, do you know what built my fortune, Peters?" William interrupted, finally turning from the window. "Recognizing patterns others miss. There's something here that doesn't add up." His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Sterling, your 4 o'clock is here. Send him in." The door opened to reveal James Morgan, principal of Newport Elementary School, clutching his briefcase nervously. "Mr. Morgan, thank you for coming on such short notice." William gestured to a chair. "Please." "An honor, Mr. Sterling," Morgan replied, his eyes darting around the opulent office. "Though I'm not entirely clear on why you requested this meeting." William smiled thinly. "I'm considering a substantial donation to your school's language program. But first, I'd like to discuss one of your students, Emma Wilson." Morgan's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Emma? Remarkable child. Exceptional test scores across all subjects. Tell me about her language abilities. Morgan hesitated. Well, she's not in our formal language program yet, but... He paused, choosing his words carefully. There was an incident last year. Our French teacher, Miss Beaumont, found Emma in the classroom after hours, reviewing advanced materials. William leaned forward. And? Miss Beaumont was impressed enough to mention it to me. She said Emma had pronunciation skills that surpassed many of her 8th grade students. Did you follow up on this information? We considered advancing her, but our district policies... Morgan trailed off under William's intense stare. Policies, William repeated with contempt. The refuge of the unimaginative. Morgan flushed. Mr. Sterling, may I ask what your interest is in this particular student? William ignored the question. I'm hosting a business event next month, European investors, primarily French. I want Emma Wilson present. I'm afraid that would require her mother's permission. Of course, William smiled coldly. Janet Wilson works for me. I'm confident we can come to an arrangement. After Morgan left, William returned to the window. The storm had intensified, lightning illuminating the churning ocean below. Miriam, he called to his assistant through the intercom, get me everything on Janet Wilson's background, college transcripts, previous employment, family connections, everything. In the kitchen downstairs, Janet tensed as she overheard the command through the service intercom that had accidentally been left on. She quickly finished polishing the silver, her mind racing. The Wilsons had secrets, ones they'd carefully guarded for years, secrets that could unravel everything if William Sterling started digging too deeply. That evening, in their small apartment, Janet pulled a dusty box from beneath her bed. Inside lay a faded photograph. Janet as a young woman standing beside an elegantly dressed older couple in front of the Eiffel Tower. Written on the back in flowing script, À notre chère Jeannette avec tout notre amour, grand-mère et grand-père Dupont. Mom. Emma stood in the doorway, watching her mother with concerned eyes. Are we in trouble? Janet carefully returned the photo to the box. No, sweetheart. But I think it's time I told you the whole truth about our family. Oin. The Newport Public Library stood 3 blocks from the ocean, a century-old building with marble columns and worn wooden floors that creaked beneath Emma's sneakers. She navigated familiar paths through towering bookshelves to the language section in the back corner, her sanctuary for the past 2 years. Emma Wilson. Just the young scholar I was hoping to see today. Mrs. Patterson called softly, her silver hair gleaming under the reading lamps as she reshelved books. Hi, Mrs. Patterson, Emma smiled, dropping her backpack beside her usual study carrel. Do you have that French poetry book you mentioned? The elderly librarian's eyes twinkled. Indeed I do. But first, tell me about this rumor I'm hearing all over town. Something about you giving William Sterling quite the linguistic surprise. Emma ducked her head. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. The best moments rarely happen as planned, Mrs. Patterson replied, patting Emma's shoulder. I've been watching you devour those language materials for years. It was only a matter of time before someone else noticed your gift. Mr. Sterling thinks I cheated somehow. Mom says he's investigating us. Mrs. Patterson's expression hardened. That man, always believing there must be some angle, some trick. She sighed. Emma, there's something I should have told you earlier. Your mother asked me not to, but circumstances have changed. She led Emma to the library's small office and closed the door. From a filing cabinet, she retrieved a folder labeled Wilson Language Program. Your mother came to me when you were 6, Emma. She explained your unusual aptitude for languages and asked if I could help coordinate special studies. She didn't have the resources for private tutoring, but she recognized your extraordinary abilities. Emma frowned. But Mom always acted surprised about my French. She knew you were studying languages. She didn't know how advanced you'd become specifically in French. You exceeded everyone's expectations. Mrs. Patterson smiled sadly. Janet wanted you to have opportunities she never finished pursuing. What do you mean? Mrs. Patterson hesitated. That's your mother's story to tell. But I will say this. There's more to Janet Wilson than being a housekeeper. The library door chimed. Through the office window, Emma spotted Lawrence Peters, William Sterling's security chief, speaking with the front desk librarian. They're looking for me, Emma whispered. Mrs. Patterson quickly slid the folder into her desk drawer. Use the back exit. I'll tell them you already left. Emma hesitated. I'm tired of hiding, Mrs. Patterson. Sometimes discretion isn't hiding. It's strategic retreat. The librarian pressed the French poetry book into Emma's hands. Baudelaire, for when you're ready. As Emma slipped out the rear door, she nearly collided with a tall man in an expensive suit. Careful there, young lady, he said, steadying her. Emma looked up into kind eyes behind stylish glasses. Sorry, sir. No harm done. He studied her curiously. You're Emma Wilson, aren't you? Emma tensed. How do you know my name? I'm Thomas Green, he replied with a warm smile, and I've been hoping to meet the girl who finally put William Sterling in his place. Janet Wilson arrived at the Sterling mansion at precisely 6:30 a.m., as she had nearly every weekday for the past 6 years. The morning routine never varied. Prepare coffee for Mr. Sterling, set breakfast for Mrs. Sterling, who barely touched it, and begin the endless cycle of cleaning that kept the 15,000-square-foot mansion immaculate. Today, however, Elizabeth Sterling was already in the kitchen, still wearing her silk robe, her usually perfect blonde hair disheveled. Janet, she said, startling the housekeeper, I need to speak with you. Janet set down her purse, heart racing. Of course, Mrs. Sterling. Elizabeth glanced toward the hallway before continuing in a hushed voice. William is planning something for the European Investors Gala, something involving Emma. Janet's hands clenched. Miss Catherine mentioned a proper examination. It's more than that. Elizabeth's perfectly manicured fingers trembled slightly as she pushed a folded paper across the counter. He's invited the French Minister of Education and several language assessment specialists from Harvard. Janet unfolded the paper, a printed email outlining an elaborate testing scenario disguised as entertainment. Why are you showing me this? Janet asked cautiously. Elizabeth's blue eyes, so similar to her husband's, yet somehow warmer, met Janet's. Because I remember what it was like to be judged by impossible standards. Before I married William, I was just a salesgirl from Pawtucket. This revelation stunned Janet. Newport gossip had always placed Elizabeth's origins in Boston's elite society. William repackaged me, Elizabeth continued bitterly. New accent, new wardrobe, new history. It was the price of admission to his world. She straightened, composure returning. Your daughter embarrassed him. He won't forget that. Emma just answered him in French. She didn't mean to. Intent is irrelevant to William. Results are everything. Elizabeth checked her diamond watch. He'll be awake in 20 minutes. We never had this conversation. As Elizabeth left, Catherine entered through the service door, unusually early. Mum's talking to you now? Catherine raised an eyebrow. Interesting development. Your mother has always been kind, Janet replied carefully. Catherine scoffed. Kind but complicit. She perched on a kitchen stool. I met with the Sterling Foundation Board yesterday. We've approved a full scholarship for Emma through college, regardless of what happens at this ridiculous gala. That's incredibly generous. But it's not generosity, it's investment in talent. Catherine's expression softened. Janet, I need to know what my father might find if he digs into your background. Janet busied herself with coffee preparation, avoiding Catherine's gaze. Nothing remarkable. Single mother, community college dropout, housekeeper. And Emma's father? Not in the picture. Catherine studied her thoughtfully. You know what's strange? In 6 years, my father never bothered learning anything about you beyond your cleaning capabilities. Now he's obsessed. Mr. Green from the library board called me last night, Janet said, changing the subject. He met Emma yesterday. Catherine tensed visibly. Thomas Green, what did he want? To offer Emma private language coaching before the gala. He said he admires her determination. Stay away from Thomas Green, Catherine warned. He and my father have a decades-long feud. If he's approaching Emma, he has motives beyond philanthropy. What kind of feud? Catherine hesitated. They were business partners once, before I was born. Something happened in France. My father never discusses it, but it ended with Thomas losing everything while Dad built Sterling Enterprises. The mansion's security system chimed, announcing William's descent from the master suite. Catherine stood quickly. Dad can't know I was here this early. Just be careful, Janet. Thomas Green might see Emma as a weapon against my father, not a child to protect. After Catherine slipped out, Janet retrieved her phone and opened a text from an international number she hadn't contacted in years. Chère Jeannette, nous avons entendu parler de la petite Emma. Est-il temps de révéler la vérité? Avec amour, grand-mère. Her grandmother's message was clear. Was it time to reveal the truth about their family? Janet stared at the Sterling family portrait hanging in the hallway. William, Elizabeth and Catherine, all perfect smiles and perfect lies. Not yet, she whispered, deleting the message as William Sterling's footsteps echoed down the marble staircase. Emma stared at the elegant business card in her hand. Thomas Green, CEO, Green Global Investments. The embossed gold lettering caught the afternoon sunlight filtering through her classroom window. Emma, the answer, please. Mrs. Harrison's voice pulled her back to the present. Sorry. Emma quickly tucked the card into her desk. The capital of France, her teacher prompted with a patient smile. Paris, Emma replied, earning a few giggles from classmates who found the question absurdly easy for her. Correct. Mrs. Harrison returned to the geography lesson as Emma's thoughts drifted back to her conversation with Thomas Green yesterday. William Sterling and I have a complicated history, he had explained as they sat on a bench outside the library. But this isn't about him, it's about recognizing extraordinary talent. He'd offered private French coaching 3 times weekly until the gala. No strings attached, he claimed. Emma wasn't sure she believed that last part. When the dismissal bell rang, Emma gathered her books slowly. Instead of heading to the after-school program where she normally waited for her mother, she walked to the administration office. I'm supposed to meet Mr. Green, she told the secretary. He's taking me to French lessons today. The secretary checked a note on her desk. Yes, your mother called this morning to approve. He's waiting outside. Thomas Green stood beside a sleek black car, casually elegant in a light grey suit. Ready for your first real lesson, Emma? During the drive to his Newport mansion, nearly as impressive as the Sterlings, but with warmer, less ostentatious decor, Thomas explained his background. I lived in France for 15 years. My late wife was Parisian. Language acquisition was her specialty. She taught at the Sorbonne. Emma studied him carefully. Why are you really helping me, Mr. Green? Thomas laughed. Perceptive. William would say I'm using you to embarrass him. Are you? Partially, he admitted, surprising her with his honesty. But mostly I recognize something in you that reminds me of my daughter. You have a daughter? A shadow crossed his face. Had. Caroline would be 26 now. I'm sorry, Emma said quietly. Thomas nodded acknowledgement as they arrived at his home. Inside, a formal living room had been transformed into a French cultural immersion space. Maps, artwork and bookshelves filled with French literature. Today, we assess your true level, Thomas explained, switching entirely to French. No more hiding your abilities. For the next hour, he tested her comprehension, vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation through increasingly complex exercises. Emma matched him at every turn, even correcting his intentional mistakes. Finally, Thomas sat back, visibly impressed. "You're not just fluent, Emma. Your French is native level, with a distinct Parisian accent." He narrowed his eyes. "That's not possible from library books and videos alone." Emma shrugged, uncomfortable with his scrutiny. "Your mother," Thomas continued carefully, "Janet, does she speak French?" "Oh, she understands more than she admits," Emma replied guardedly. Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "The Sterling Gala is in 3 weeks. William is arranging for language experts to evaluate you. Designed as an elegant party game, but really intended to expose you as a fraud." "I'm not a fraud." "I know," Thomas said gently. "But William can't accept that a housekeeper's daughter possesses talents his own family lacks. It contradicts his worldview." He stood and retrieved a leather portfolio from his desk. "These are dossiers on each expert William has invited. We'll prepare for their specific testing approaches." Emma flipped through the detailed profiles. "This is like spy stuff." Thomas smiled grimly. Business at William's level often is. As their session concluded, Thomas drove Emma home. Outside her apartment, he seemed hesitant. "Emma, there's something strange about your situation. Your abilities suggest early immersion or native exposure, not self-study." Emma remained silent. "I knew your mother briefly, years ago," Thomas continued. "Before you were born, she worked for a French family visiting Newport." Emma's head snapped up. "What family?" "The DuPonts, extremely wealthy Parisian industrialists." Thomas watched her reaction carefully. "Your grandmother wouldn't happen to be French, would she?" Before Emma could respond, the apartment door opened to reveal Janet, her expression a mixture of relief and alarm. "Mr. Green," she said stiffly, "thank you for bringing Emma home." "Janet," Thomas nodded, "your daughter is remarkable." "Yes, she is," Janet replied, ushering Emma inside. "And we need to discuss these arrangements further before continuing." As the door closed, Thomas remained standing there, staring thoughtfully at their modest apartment. He pulled out his phone and dialed an international number. "Marcel, c'est Thomas. J'ai besoin d'informations sur la famille Dupont de Paris, particulièrement concernant une Américaine nommée Janet Wilson." The morning light filtered through the curtains of the Wilsons' small apartment as Janet sat across from Emma at their kitchen table. 2 cups of hot chocolate steamed between them, a Sunday tradition since Emma was 3. But today was different. Today was about truth. "You asked about this last night," Janet said, sliding the faded photograph across the table. "These are your great-grandparents, Henri and Mathilde Dupont." Emma studied the elegant couple standing in front of the Eiffel Tower with a younger Janet. "They're my real family? From France?" "Part of your family, yes. My mother, your grandmother Claire, fell in love with an American soldier stationed in Paris. My father, James Wilson, brought her back to Rhode Island after they married." "So you're half French?" Emma's eyes widened. "Why didn't you tell me?" Janet sighed, wrapping her hands around her mug. "The Duponts are one of France's wealthiest families. They never approved of my father. They thought he wasn't good enough for their daughter. When my mother died giving birth to me, they blamed him. That's not fair." "No, it wasn't. My father raised me alone in Newport, but when I was 16, the Duponts reconnected. They offered to finance my education if I would spend summers with them in Paris. That's how I learned French. Immersion with my grandparents." Emma leaned forward. "So I inherited your gift for languages?" "You didn't just inherit it, you surpassed it." Janet smiled, touching Emma's cheek. "When you were 4, I noticed how quickly you picked up words from the Spanish cartoon show you loved. By 5, you were correcting my French pronunciation. But why keep it a secret? Why pretend to be surprised when I spoke French at Mr. Sterling's dinner?" Janet's expression darkened. The DuPonts weren't just wealthy, Emma. They had connections to people like William Sterling. My grandfather and William were business partners briefly in the 1990s, along with Thomas Green. Mr. Green mentioned that. What happened between them? A deal went wrong. Very wrong. William somehow managed to take control of my grandfather's American investments while simultaneously destroying Thomas Green's company. My grandfather lost millions, though the family was wealthy enough to absorb the blow. Thomas lost everything. Emma processed this, her young mind connecting dots with remarkable speed. So when Mr. Sterling hired you 6 years ago, he had no idea who I was, Janet confirmed. The Wilsons were nothing to him, just a convenient last name belonging to a qualified housekeeper who needed work after her husband left. My father, Emma said quietly. Was he really just someone who abandoned us? Janet reached for Emma's hand. David was a good man who couldn't handle being a parent, but there's something else you should know. She hesitated, then continued. After David left, when you were just 2, I was desperate. I contacted my grandparents. They offered to take us both in, give us a life of privilege in Paris. Why didn't we go? Because it came with conditions. They wanted to legally adopt you, raise you as a DuPont, erase the Wilson name entirely. Janet's voice trembled. I couldn't surrender my daughter, even for all the comfort and opportunity they offered. Emma squeezed her mother's hand. I'm glad you didn't. The apartment buzzer interrupted them. Janet checked the security monitor and froze. It's Thomas Green, and he's not alone. On the small screen, Thomas stood beside an elegant elderly couple. The woman's posture and silver-streaked dark hair immediately reminded Emma of her mother. The man, despite his age, stood tall in an impeccably tailored suit. Are those? Emma whispered. Janet nodded, her face pale. Your great-grandparents. The DuPonts have come to Newport. How did they know about us? Thomas must have contacted them after discovering our connection. Janet's hand shook as she reached for the intercom. But the real question is, whose side are they on? The Sterling mansion hummed with activity as staff prepared for the European Investors' Gala. William paced his office while Lawrence Peters delivered his report. Thomas Green has been giving the girl private French lessons, Peters said. 3 times a week since their first meeting. William stopped pacing. And you're just telling me this now? We only confirmed it yesterday. They've been careful, varying schedules, different pickup locations. What game is Thomas playing? William muttered, more to himself than Peters. He has no interest in children or education. There's more, sir. International visitors arrived at Green's estate yesterday, an elderly French couple. Our sources identified them as Henri and Mathilde Dupont. William's face drained of color. The DuPonts, here in Newport. You know them, sir? William dismissed the question with a wave. What's their connection to Thomas? Unclear, but they visited Janet Wilson's apartment yesterday and stayed for several hours. William sank into his chair, mind racing. After 30 years, could the DuPonts still be seeking revenge for that Paris deal? He'd always assumed they considered the loss too insignificant to pursue, a rounding error in their vast fortune. Sir? Peters prompted. Should we adjust security protocols for the gala? Double everything, William ordered, and get me every piece of information on Janet Wilson's background. Birth records, education, family connections, everything. After Peters left, William unlocked a hidden safe behind his bookshelf and removed a worn leather portfolio. Inside lay documents from his early business days, including a yellowed newspaper clipping with the headline, American Businessman Dies in Paris Hotel, Foul Play Suspected. Below it, a photo showed a younger William shaking hands with the deceased, Thomas Green's former father-in-law and William's one-time business partner. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Sterling, your daughter is here." Catherine entered without waiting for his response, elegant as always in her business attire. "We need to talk about this ridiculous examination you're planning for Emma Wilson." "It's merely entertainment for our European guests," William replied smoothly, discreetly returning the portfolio to his desk drawer. "It's public humiliation of a child, and you know it." Catherine crossed her arms. "The Sterling Foundation has already offered her a full scholarship. Why not just let this go?" "You offered what?" William's voice dropped dangerously. "A full scholarship through college. Emma Wilson has extraordinary potential." "You had no right." "As executive director of the foundation, I have every right," Catherine interrupted. "Your pride is hurt because an 8-year-old bested you in front of your peers. Get over it." William studied his daughter, noting her defiant posture, so like her mother in their early years, before Elizabeth had learned the cost of defiance in his world. "You've never taken such personal interest in a scholarship candidate before," he observed. "Why this child?" Catherine hesitated. "Because she reminds me of myself at that age, before you and Mother remolded me into the perfect Sterling daughter. We gave you every advantage." "You gave me a role to play," Catherine corrected. "The dutiful daughter who went to the right schools, socialized with the right people, and never ever embarrassed the family." William's expression hardened. "And in exchange, you have wealth, influence, and opportunities most people can only dream of." "At what cost?" Catherine sighed, suddenly looking tired. "I met the DuPonts yesterday." William stiffened. "What did they tell you?" "Nothing yet, but they've requested a meeting with me tomorrow." She narrowed her eyes. "What aren't you telling me about your history with them? Business dealings from before you were born, nothing relevant to the present." "Then why did you look like you'd seen a ghost when I mentioned their name?" Catherine pressed. The intercom saved him from answering. "Mr. Sterling, the French Minister of Education is calling regarding the gala arrangements." "I need to take this," William said, reaching for the phone. Catherine moved toward the door, but paused. "Whatever happened between you and the DuPonts, don't punish a child for it. This examination at the gala, call it off. The arrangements are finalized. The minister himself is looking forward to it." William covered the phone receiver. "But I'll ensure it's conducted with appropriate sensitivity." After Catherine left, William spoke into the phone. "Minister Pelletier, thank you for calling. Yes, about the young prodigy I mentioned. I'm particularly interested in your most rigorous assessment methods. We want to leave no doubt about the authenticity of her abilities." Meanwhile, in Thomas Green's study, Emma sat between her great-grandparents, conversing fluently in French as Thomas observed with satisfaction. "Your accent is impeccable, ma petite," Mathilde marveled, patting Emma's hand. "A true Dupont." "She has Janet's gift, but refined beyond her years," Henri agreed, his voice still strong despite his 86 years. Thomas cleared his throat. "Emma, would you mind if I spoke privately with your great-grandparents for a moment?" After Emma left, Thomas addressed the elderly couple. "William knows you're in Newport. His security chief has been asking questions." Henry's expression hardened. "Good. Let him sweat. This isn't just about old business grudges anymore," Thomas cautioned. "There's a child involved now?" "A DuPont child," Mathilde corrected firmly. "Our great-granddaughter who deserves her rightful place and inheritance." "Janet rejected that option years ago," Thomas reminded them. "She wants Emma to have a normal childhood." Henri scoffed. "Normal? Daughter of a housekeeper living above a garage, when she could be educated at the finest schools in Europe?" "That's not our decision to make," Thomas said quietly. "But exposing William's past actions, that's different. He's planning to publicly humiliate an 8-year-old girl to satisfy his ego. I think we can all agree that deserves a response." Mathilde reached for her husband's hand. "What do you propose, Thomas?" Something William Sterling will never expect, Thomas smiled. The truth. Absolutely not. Janet paced Thomas Green's living room, where they had gathered for an emergency meeting. You cannot reveal Emma's connection to the Dupont family at the gala. Henri Dupont raised an eyebrow. She bears our name as much as Wilson's, Jeanette. Janet, she corrected automatically. I haven't been Jeanette since I was 16. The point, Thomas interrupted, is that William is setting a trap. These language specialists aren't coming to celebrate Emma's abilities. They're coming to discredit her, which is precisely why we must reveal who she truly is, Mathilde insisted. No one would dare question the linguistic abilities of a Dupont heir. Emma sat quietly on the window seat, watching the adults debate her future. Tomorrow night's gala loomed less than 24 hours away. May I say something? She finally asked. Her voice small but determined. The adults fell silent, turning toward her. I don't want to be a Dupont or a Wilson tomorrow night. I just want to be Emma. She looked at each of them in turn. I've been practicing with Mr. Green. I can pass their tests without using my family name as a shield. Janet crossed to her daughter, kneeling beside the window seat. Sweetheart, these experts are being brought in specifically to try to make you fail. Then I won't fail, Emma said simply. Thomas exchanged glances with the Duponts. The child has spirit. Dupont spirit. Henri nodded approvingly. A knock at the door interrupted them. Thomas's housekeeper appeared. Miss Sterling is here to see you, sir. Catherine entered, elegant in a casual sweater and slacks, looking momentarily taken aback by the assembled group. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you had company. Catherine, Thomas greeted her. Perfect timing. We were just discussing tomorrow's gala. Catherine's eyes darted from Janet to Emma, then lingered on the elderly French couple. Mr. and Mrs. Dupont, I presume. I'm Catherine Sterling. We know who you are, Henri replied coolly. Your foundation's scholarship offer to our great-granddaughter was generous. Catherine's eyes widened slightly at great-granddaughter, but she recovered quickly. Emma deserves every opportunity we can provide. Janet stood. Catherine, you should know that your father and the Duponts have history. I gathered as much from my father's reaction when I mentioned meeting them. Catherine turned to Thomas. And where do you fit into all this, Mr. Green? Thomas was once partnered with both your father and Henri, Mathilde explained. Until William's betrayal destroyed Thomas's company and cost us millions in American investments. Catherine processed this, her expression carefully neutral. And now you're all using an 8-year-old girl to settle decades-old scores. That's not fair, Janet protested. Isn't it? Catherine challenged. My father's ridiculous examination, your family's sudden reappearance, Thomas's convenient mentorship, everyone seems to have agendas that have nothing to do with Emma's welfare. Emma stood suddenly. I'm not being used. I'm choosing to do this. The adults fell silent, surprised by her certainty. Mr. Green taught me about the tests they'll use. Great-grandpère and grandmère told me stories about our family history. Mum has always supported my learning. Emma looked directly at Catherine. I want to do this. For myself. Catherine studied the child thoughtfully. You understand what you're walking into? My father doesn't lose gracefully. Neither do I, Emma replied with a hint of a smile. Catherine laughed unexpectedly. I believe that. She turned serious again. But you should know my father has escalated the examination. The French Minister of Education has designed a series of increasingly difficult challenges. It's excessive. Thomas frowned. Minister Pelletier is involved personally. That goes beyond ego into obsession. William has always been obsessive about winning, Henri commented. Some things never change. Janet reached for Emma's hand. We can still back out. Say you're sick. We don't have to do this. Running away would only confirm what Mr. Sterling believes, That I'm not good enough, Emma replied with wisdom beyond her years. I want to show him he's wrong. Catherine studied the determined child, then made a decision. I may be able to help. I have access to the examination questions. Minister Pelletier sent them to my father this morning. Catherine, Janet hesitated. That would be the bare minimum to level an uneven playing field, Catherine finished. My father has stacked every card against Emma. This merely gives her a fighting chance. Henri nodded approvingly. The daughter is not the father, it seems. Not entirely, Catherine agreed with a wry smile. Though I did learn his most valuable lesson, always have leverage. She reached into her purse and withdrew a memory stick. This contains the examination protocol for tomorrow night. Use it wisely. As she turned to leave, Emma called after her. Why are you helping me? Catherine paused at the door. Because 6 years ago, I watched my father reduce a brilliant young woman to just the housekeeper. I've regretted my silence ever since. She looked at Janet. Maybe this is my chance to finally make that right. After Catherine left, Emma turned to the adults with newfound determination. We have work to do. The Sterling mansion blazed with light against the darkening Newport sky. Limousines and luxury cars lined the circular driveway as Newport's elite mingled with European investors and diplomats. At the center of it all, William Sterling played the consummate host, champagne in hand, while silently counting the minutes until the evening's special entertainment. In a guest room upstairs, Janet adjusted the ribbon on Emma's simple but elegant blue dress. Remember, you don't have to go through with this. We can leave right now. Emma checked her reflection in the mirror. I'm ready, Mom. A soft knock preceded Catherine's entrance. They're about to begin the formal dinner. Emma, you'll be seated between Minister Pelletier and Professor Rousseau from the Sorbonne. As planned, Emma nodded. My father has no idea you've seen the examination materials, Catherine confirmed. But be careful, he's added a section on obscure regional dialects that wasn't in the original protocol. Janet tensed. That's not fair. It's okay, Emma assured them. Mr. Green covered Provençal and Occitan variations yesterday. I'm prepared. Catherine smiled admiringly. You're something else, Emma Wilson. DuPont Wilson, Emma corrected, with newfound confidence. I'm both. Downstairs, the grand dining room hummed with multilingual conversations. William surveyed the scene with satisfaction, noting the French academic delegation at the center table. His gaze froze when he spotted Thomas Green entering with Henri and Mathilde Dupont. Who invited them? He demanded of Lawrence Peters. They're on the guest list, sir. Mrs. Sterling added them yesterday. William suppressed his anger as he approached the unwelcome guests. Thomas, Henri, Mathilde, what an unexpected pleasure. William, Thomas replied smoothly, magnificent event as always. The DuPonts were in Newport on business, Elizabeth explained, appearing at William's side. I thought they might enjoy our little cultural exchange. William's tight smile never reached his eyes. How thoughtful of you, dear. It's been too long, William, Henry said, his accent still thick despite decades of international business. 30 years since Paris, no? Before William could respond, the dinner bell chimed. As guests found their places, Emma entered with Janet and Catherine. The room hushed momentarily. Many had heard rumors about the housekeeper's daughter who had supposedly embarrassed William Sterling. Minister Pelletier, a distinguished man with salt and pepper hair, stood to greet Emma. Ah, la petite prodige! Enchantée, mademoiselle. Le plaisir est le mien, monsieur le ministre. Emma replied flawlessly, executing a small curtsy that delighted the French delegation. Throughout the elaborate 7-course meal, Emma conversed easily in French with the academics surrounding her. William watched from the head table, his expression darkening as she fielded increasingly complex questions without hesitation. Your protégé is remarkable, François Dubois commented beside him. a natural diplomat in the making. "We'll see," William replied curtly. As dessert concluded, William tapped his crystal glass. The room fell silent. "Distinguished guests, as promised, we have a special cultural demonstration tonight." He gestured toward Emma. "Some of you may have heard about young Miss Wilson's surprising linguistic abilities. Tonight, our French educational delegation has prepared a series of challenges to explore the depth of her skills." Minister Pelletier stood. "Indeed, we have designed a comprehensive examination covering vocabulary, grammar, literature, regional dialects, and cultural knowledge. Most university students would find it challenging." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Emma was escorted to a small stage area arranged at one end of the ballroom. 3 professors from the Sorbonne joined her, along with Minister Pelletier. The examination began with straightforward vocabulary and grammar questions, which Emma navigated easily. As the difficulty increased, guests leaned forward in their chairs, captivated by the child's composure. "Maintenant," Minister Pelletier announced, "we move to regional variations. Please identify and reproduce this dialect." He played a recording of an elderly farmer speaking in a thick regional accent. William smiled smugly. This section hadn't been in the original protocol. Emma listened intently, then replied, "C'est le dialecte provençal de la région d'Avignon, influencé par l'occitan." She proceeded to replicate the accent perfectly, adding, "My great-grandmother's housekeeper spoke this way when discussing local markets." Minister Pelletier raised his eyebrows, clearly impressed. William's smile faltered. For the next 30 minutes, Emma handled every challenge flawlessly, discussing French literature, explaining cultural nuances, even identifying obscure idiomatic expressions. Finally, William interrupted. "While this is certainly impressive memorization, perhaps we should test actual comprehension and spontaneous response." Minister Pelletier looked confused. "That was not part of our agreed protocol, monsieur." "A simple addition," William insisted. "Surely if Miss Wilson is truly fluent, she can handle an unrehearsed conversation about her own background." The room tensed. Janet half rose from her seat, but Catherine placed a restraining hand on her arm. "Bien sûr," Emma agreed calmly. "What would you like to know, Mr. Sterling?" William switched to rapid, complex French. "Tell us, how does a housekeeper's daughter acquire such perfect French? Who taught you? What's the real story behind this remarkable talent?" The challenge hung in the air. This was William's trap: force Emma to either admit to coaching or fabricate an implausible explanation. Emma took a deep breath and replied in equally perfect French. "The truth, Mr. Sterling? I learned from my mother, who learned from her mother, who was born Claire Dupont in Paris." A collective gasp swept through the room. Henri and Mathilde Dupont stood, drawing all eyes. "My great-grandparents," Emma continued, gesturing toward them, "have helped preserve our family's language and heritage, even though we've lived modestly in America." William's face drained of color as Emma continued, her voice growing stronger. "You see, Mr. Sterling, not all wealth is displayed in mansions and galas. Some of us inherit gifts that can't be bought or sold, like language, resilience, and dignity." For the first time in living memory, William Sterling was rendered completely speechless. The Sterling Mansion ballroom had fallen into stunned silence. William gripped the edge of the head table, knuckles white, as the implications of Emma's revelation cascaded through his mind. Janet Wilson wasn't just a housekeeper. She was Janet Dupont Wilson, granddaughter of Henri Dupont, his former business partner and victim. Minister Pelletier broke the silence, applauding enthusiastically. "Magnifique! Not only exceptional language skills, but also such poise under pressure." The room erupted in applause. Guests surrounded Emma, offering congratulations in multiple languages. The French academics declared the examination concluded with highest honors. William retreated to his study, Elizabeth following close behind. Once the door closed, he rounded on her. "You knew. You invited the DuPonts deliberately." "I knew Janet was more than she seemed," Elizabeth admitted. "But the DuPont connection, that was a surprise even to me." "Thomas Green orchestrated this entire humiliation," William fumed, pouring himself a generous scotch. 30 years of buried history, and he uses a child to resurrect it. "The child you were planning to publicly embarrass," Elizabeth reminded him pointedly. "What did you expect, William? That everyone would stand by while you bullied an 8-year-old girl? This isn't about the girl." William slammed his glass down. "It's about the past. Harris, 1995, the DuPont merger." "The deal that launched Sterling Enterprises," Elizabeth nodded. "Your first major acquisition." William laughed bitterly. "Acquisition? That's the sanitized version we've told for years." He collapsed into his leather chair. "Henri trusted me with his American expansion. Thomas and I were equal partners managing his investment. And then Thomas's father-in-law died unexpectedly," Elizabeth finished. "I remember the headlines. What the headlines didn't report was that I had leveraged information from both sides to position myself as the sole survivor when it all collapsed." William stared into his drink. "Thomas lost everything. Henri lost millions. I emerged with controlling interest in what became Sterling Enterprises. And now their families have converged in our home," Elizabeth said quietly, "with Janet having worked for you for 6 years without you ever realizing who she was." A knock interrupted them. Catherine entered without waiting for permission, her expression controlled, but anger simmering beneath the surface. "Congratulations, Father. You've managed to make yourself the villain in a story that will be circulating through Newport society for decades." "Catherine, I knew you could be cold," she continued, "but trying to humiliate a child, that crosses a line even for you." "I didn't know who she was," William defended. "That makes it worse," Catherine exclaimed. "You were willing to crush an anonymous child simply because she embarrassed you once. At least if you'd known she was a DuPont, your cruelty would have had some twisted historical justification." Elizabeth placed a warning hand on Catherine's arm. "Your father recognizes his mistake." "Does he?" Catherine challenged. "Because right now there's a brilliant young girl receiving job offers from the French cultural attaché and university scholarship inquiries from Harvard and Princeton. Meanwhile, the business associates you were trying to impress are wondering what kind of man targets a child." William stood abruptly. "Where is Janet Wilson now?" "DuPont Wilson," Catherine corrected, "and she's in the conservatory with her daughter and grandparents, fielding congratulations from your European investors." William straightened his tie. "Then I believe it's time I paid my respects to the DuPont family." "William," Elizabeth cautioned, "think carefully about what you're going to do." "For once, my dear, I intend to do exactly that." In the conservatory, Emma sat beside her great-grandparents while Janet stood nearby, watching her daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. Thomas Green approached with champagne for the adults and sparkling cider for Emma. "To the newest star of Newport society," he toasted. "And the best-kept secret in Sterling Enterprises history." "It wasn't about revenge, Thomas," Janet said quietly. "I needed the job after David left. I had no idea William Sterling was the same man from my grandfather's stories until I'd already been working there for months." "And you stayed?" Thomas asked incredulously. "Single mother, no college degree, excellent salary and benefits," Janet shrugged. "Pride is a luxury when you're raising a child alone." Henri patted Janet's hand. "You could have come to us, Jeanette, and give up my independence, become the charity case granddaughter." Janet shook her head. "I needed to make my own way." "And you have," Matilda said proudly. Though perhaps now you'll reconsider our offer. Emma clearly belongs in an environment that nurtures her exceptional talents." Before Janet could respond, a hush fell over the conservatory. William Sterling stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Dupont," he said formally. "Mrs. Dupont. Might I have a word?" Henri rose, still straight-backed despite his years. "I believe anything you have to say can be said in front of my family, William." William hesitated, then nodded. "Very well." He turned to Janet. "Ms. Dupont-Wilson, I owe you an apology. 6 years of loyal service, and I never bothered to learn who you truly were." "Would it have mattered?" Janet asked. "Perhaps not initially," William admitted, "but it might have prevented tonight's miscalculation." Emma stood, moving to her mother's side. William's gaze shifted to her. "Young lady, your performance tonight was exceptional. Regardless of family connections, your abilities are extraordinary." "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," Emma replied politely. William turned back to Henri. 30 years is a long time to carry a grudge, Henri." "Not when the betrayal cost so much," Henri replied evenly, "though tonight has provided a certain poetic justice." William nodded. "Indeed. Well played." He reached into his jacket and withdrew a folded document. "Catherine tells me the Sterling Foundation has offered Emma a scholarship. I'd like to supplement that with this." He handed the document to Janet. "A trust fund for Emma's education. $10 million, as promised that first night. No strings attached." The room fell silent as Janet unfolded the document, eyes widening as she scanned its contents. "Why?" she asked simply. William glanced at his daughter, who watched him with surprised approval. "Let's call it an investment in exceptional talent, and perhaps a first step toward amends." 1 year later, Emma stood on the terrace of the Dupont summer estate in Newport, watching sailboats drift across the bay. At 9 years old, she had grown an inch taller, her confidence matching her height as she conversed in rapid French with her great-grandfather. "They're here," Henri said, nodding toward the driveway where a sleek car was pulling up. Emma smoothed her dress nervously. "Do you think they'll like my presentation?" "They'd be fools not to," Henri assured her. "And William Sterling may be many things, but never a fool." Inside, the Grand Salon had been transformed into a showcase for the Emma Wilson Language Institute, the non-profit Emma had conceptualized with her mother's help, funded by William Sterling's $10 million trust. Janet greeted the arriving guests. "Catherine, thank you for coming. Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, welcome to the Dupont estate." William took in the elegant surroundings, so different from his own ostentatious mansion. Quite a change from the apartment above Mrs. Henderson's garage. "We still keep it," Janet replied. "Emma and I split our time between both places. She needs to remember where we started." Elizabeth Sterling admired a family portrait showing 4 generations of Duponts, including Janet and Emma. "Your daughter has accomplished remarkable things this year." "With remarkable support," Janet acknowledged. "The Sterling Foundation's involvement has been instrumental." Catherine beamed. "The foundation merely provided structure. Emma's vision drove everything." Thomas Green entered with Mathilde Dupont. "Our guest of honor is ready to begin whenever you are." The guests gathered in the salon, where Emma stood confidently beside a multimedia presentation. Notable among the attendees were Minister Pelletier, François Dubois, and representatives from 5 international education foundations. "Thank you all for coming," Emma began in English, before seamlessly transitioning to French, then Spanish, then back to English. The Emma Wilson Language Institute has a simple mission: to identify children with language aptitude and provide them resources regardless of economic background. For the next 15 minutes, Emma presented the Institute's first-year accomplishments. 27 children from underprivileged backgrounds enrolled in intensive language programs, a digital platform for remote learning, and partnerships with schools in 3 states. Language opened doors for me, Emma concluded. I want to open those same doors for others. Applause filled the room. Minister Pelletier rose first. The French Ministry of Education is prepared to offer full matching funds for the Institute's 2nd year of operations. Other commitments quickly followed. Catherine announced the Sterling Foundation would double its support, while Thomas Green pledged technical resources from his companies. As the reception continued, William found himself alone with Emma on the terrace. Impressive presentation, he said. You've put the money to good use. Did you expect otherwise? Emma asked. William smiled slightly. No, you proved your capabilities quite thoroughly last year. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before William spoke again. Your mother is an extraordinary woman, to work in my home for years, knowing our history. Mom says holding grudges costs too much, Emma replied. But forgetting would cost even more. Wise beyond her years, like her daughter, William acknowledged. The DuPont intelligence clearly runs strong. Wilson intelligence too, Emma corrected. My dad wasn't perfect, but he taught me resilience before he left. William studied the young girl thoughtfully. You know, when I was building Sterling Enterprises, I justified many actions by telling myself I was creating a legacy for Catherine, yet she never wanted the kind of empire I envisioned. What did she want? To make a difference, much like you're doing now. William gazed out at the horizon. It took me 63 years and a public humbling by an 8-year-old to recognize the difference between a legacy and an ego project. Emma smiled. Is that why you're funding the Institute? Redemption? William laughed genuinely. Perhaps, though I prefer to think of it as a sound investment in exceptional talent. Inside, Janet watched her daughter conversing easily with William Sterling, former adversary, current ally. A remarkable transformation, Thomas commented, joining her. In both of them. Janet nodded. Emma's always had that effect on people. She sees beyond surface identities to possibilities. A trait worth $10 million, apparently. Thomas smiled. The money helped, Janet acknowledged, but it was William's public acknowledgement of her abilities that mattered most. Recognition is a powerful currency. Catherine approached with Henri and Mathilde. Your daughter is negotiating additional funding from my father, she observed with amusement. She drives a hard bargain for a 9-year-old. Emma knows what she wants, Mathilde said proudly. A true DuPont. With Wilson determination, Janet added. Henri took Janet's hand. And her mother's wisdom to navigate between worlds without being owned by either. On the terrace, Emma had extracted a commitment for an additional $1 million from William for a new digital language platform. You're quite the negotiator, Ms. Wilson, William noted with grudging respect. DuPont Wilson, Emma corrected with a smile. I'm both, Mr. Sterling. That's something I've learned this year. We don't have to choose one identity when we can embrace the fullness of who we are. William considered this. A lesson many adults never master. As the sun set over Newport, casting golden light across the gathering, Emma rejoined her mother. Janet wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders. Happy? Janet asked softly. Emma nodded, watching as former adversaries, Sterlings, DuPonts and Greens, conversed amicably about future collaborations. A year ago, I just wanted to prove I belonged in Mr. Sterling's fancy dining room. Now I know I belong wherever I choose to make a difference. Janet kissed the top of her daughter's head. Language gives voice to who we are, but character determines what we say with that voice. You've found yours. In French and English, Emma grinned. In all the languages of your heritage, Janet corrected. And in the universal language of bringing people together. And as twilight descended, The unlikely alliance of families continued their conversations, united by a child who had turned a moment of cruelty into a catalyst for transformation, proving that the most powerful language of all transcends words, the language of courage, compassion, and possibility. 8-year-old orphan girl comforts a 4-year-old autistic boy who refuses to eat after his mom's death. His widowed millionaire father doesn't know how to cook. Before we begin, tell me something about where you live. What's the weather like today? The November rain hammered against the windows of the upscale Seattle neighborhood as 8-year-old Emma pressed her face against the cold glass of the coffee shop. Her torn sneakers squelched against the wet pavement, and her oversized jacket, 3 sizes too big and found in a dumpster behind a thrift store, hung like a tent around her small frame. She clutched a crumpled dollar bill she'd found earlier that morning in a parking lot, enough for maybe half a muffin if she was lucky. Inside the warm cafe, she watched a man in an expensive charcoal suit sitting at a corner table, his head buried in his hands, his shoulders shook with barely contained sobs. Across from him sat a little boy, maybe 4 years old, staring blankly at an untouched plate of golden pancakes dripping with syrup. The boy's dark hair was perfectly combed, his clothes pristine, a tiny button-down shirt and pressed khakis, but something about his complete stillness made Emma's heart ache with recognition. The man looked up, revealing eyes that were red-rimmed and desperate, dark circles underneath, suggesting weeks without proper sleep. "Please, Tommy!" His voice cracked through the window, raw with desperation. "Just one bite, anything, please, son. Mommy would want you to eat. She'd be so worried about you getting thin like this." The little boy didn't respond. He sat motionless as a statue, his small hands folded neatly in his lap, staring through the food as if it didn't exist in his world. Emma watched the man's shoulders shake as he fought back tears that threatened to spill over again. She'd seen that kind of pain before, the hollow, crushing emptiness that comes when someone you love disappears forever, leaving you lost in a world that suddenly makes no sense. The boy's lips moved almost imperceptibly, his voice barely a whisper. "Mommy food, only mommy food. No other food." Emma's chest tightened with understanding. She knew that voice, the broken whisper of a child lost in grief so deep it swallowed everything else. She'd heard it in her own voice 2 years ago. Without thinking, she pushed open the cafe door, the little bell announcing her entrance. The warmth hit her like a hug she hadn't felt in months, carrying the scent of coffee and cinnamon, but she ignored the curious stares from other customers as she approached their table. Her wet shoes left small puddles on the polished floor as she walked, her chin held high despite her ragged appearance. Other patrons glanced at her with mixtures of pity and disapproval. This clearly homeless child didn't belong in their upscale establishment. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, but clear and sure. The man looked up, startled by the small, bedraggled figure standing beside their table. His first instinct was to call security, but something in her eyes stopped him. They held a wisdom far beyond her years, and a sadness that matched his own. "Your little boy. He's sad about his mommy, isn't he?" James Mitchell stared at this impossible child, dirty, clearly homeless, but speaking with the gravity of someone who understood loss. Yes, she passed away 2 months ago, and he won't eat anything. He's getting so thin, and I don't know what to do anymore. The doctors say if he doesn't start eating soon." His voice broke completely, the words too terrible to finish. Emma nodded solemnly, as if she'd expected this answer. "My mommy went away too, but I learned something really important after she left." She looked directly at Tommy, who for the first time since she'd entered, turned his head slightly toward her voice. There was something different about this girl. She didn't talk to him like the doctors who poked and prodded, or the nannies who tried to force food into his mouth. "Sometimes, when mommies go to heaven, they leave their love in the food, but daddies have to learn the magic words to make it work again." For a moment, the entire cafe seemed to hold its breath, as if everyone sensed they were witnessing something extraordinary, James Mitchell studied the strange little girl standing beside their table, unsure whether to call security or listen to whatever impossible thing she might say next. His businessman's mind told him this was absurd, a homeless child spouting nonsense about magic, but something in Tommy's reaction stopped him cold. His son had actually looked at another person for the first time in weeks, really looked, with focus and interest instead of that terrifying blank stare. "Magic words," James whispered, afraid to break whatever spell was happening between this mysterious child and his son. Emma nodded with the seriousness of a scientist explaining a crucial discovery. She carefully climbed onto the empty chair beside Tommy, moving slowly so as not to startle him. She was so small, her feet barely hung over the edge, swinging slightly as she settled in. "My mommy taught me before she went to heaven. She said love gets cooked into food, but you have to say the special words while you make it or the love gets lost and the food becomes just. Regular food, empty food." Tommy's head tilted slightly to the right, the most movement James had seen from him in days. His son's eyes, usually so vacant, held the faintest spark of curiosity. "What kind of words?" James asked, his voice hoarse with desperate hope. He'd tried everything, child psychologists, nutritionists, even a priest who'd assured him that prayer would help. Nothing had worked. His son was slowly fading away, and James felt powerless to stop it. Emma reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small, worn piece of paper that had been folded and refolded so many times the creases were white with wear. The edges were soft from constant handling, and James could see faded pencil marks across its surface. She held it like it was made of the most precious material on earth. "These words. My mommy wrote them down for me before the sickness took her away. She said even if I couldn't cook yet because I was too little, I should keep them safe for when I learned, or for when I met someone who needed them." She smoothed the paper carefully on the table between them. "But your little boy's mommy, she already taught you the words, didn't she, Tommy? She just taught them in a different way." Tommy's eyes moved to Emma's face for the first time, really seeing her. Mommy sing when she cook, happy songs, kitchen songs." "Yes!" Emma's face lit up with genuine joy, as if Tommy had just solved the world's most important puzzle. That's exactly how the love gets in. She was singing her love right into the food while she cooked. Every note was like a little hug going into the soup or the cookies or whatever she was making. But now, Daddy has to learn her songs, so the love can come back. James felt his throat close up with emotion. Sarah had always sung while cooking, little melodies she'd hum while chopping vegetables or stirring sauces. Made-up songs about what they were having for dinner, silly rhymes that made Tommy giggle from his high chair. He'd loved listening to her, had sometimes danced with her around the kitchen, but he'd never paid attention to learning them himself. After the cancer took her, he'd tried everything. Expensive takeout, hired chefs, pre-made meals from the best restaurants in Seattle. But Tommy refused everything that didn't come from his mother's hand. "I don't know her songs," James admitted, his voice breaking with shame and regret. "I never learned to cook. I was always working late, closing deals, building the company, and she did everything domestic. She said she loved taking care of us, so I let her. I should have learned. I should have paid attention." Emma's expression grew thoughtful, her young face serious as she considered this problem. Maybe I could help. I know some songs for cooking that my mommy taught me. And if your little boy helps choose the words and remembers his mommy's songs, maybe his mommy's love might find a way to come back through the food. Different voice, but same love." The hope blooming in James's chest was almost painful. You know how to cook? You're only... How old are you?" "8," Emma said quietly, her voice carrying a weight of experience that no 8-year-old should possess. "When you live by yourself, you have to learn fast or you don't eat. But I think Tommy's mommy was really, really good at cooking, wasn't she? I can tell by how much he misses her food." Tommy spoke again, his voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "Mommy make best food ever, sing happy songs, kitchen smell good, mommy laugh when flour get everywhere." James stared at this impossible child who had somehow gotten his son to speak more in 10 minutes than he had in 2 months of doctors and specialists. The next morning, Emma waited outside the towering glass building where James worked, shivering in the Seattle drizzle that seemed to seep through every layer of her inadequate clothing. She'd spent the night in a doorway 3 blocks away, curled up behind some garbage bins with her jacket pulled over her head, clutching the piece of paper with her mother's recipes and wondering if the sad man in the expensive suit would actually come back for her like he'd promised. Rich people made lots of promises, she'd learned during her 2 years on the streets. They'd see a homeless child, feel a moment of guilt or pity, offer help, then forget about it the moment they got distracted by their real lives. But something about the desperation in James Mitchell's eyes had seemed different. The way he'd looked at her when Tommy responded, like she was some kind of miracle instead of just a dirty street kid, at exactly noon, just as he'd promised. A sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb. James Mitchell stepped out, looking around nervously, until he spotted her small figure huddled against the concrete wall of the bank building. He was wearing another expensive suit, this one navy blue, but his hair looked like he'd been running his hands through it all morning. "Emma!" He approached carefully, as if she might bolt like a frightened animal. "You came. I wasn't sure. I was afraid you might not trust me." She stood up straighter, despite her chattering teeth, trying to look brave and capable instead of small and scared. "I said I would help, Tommy. I keep my promises." Her voice was steady, but James could see the way she was trembling. Whether from cold or nerves, he couldn't tell. James noticed her blue-tinged lips and the way she was shaking, her small body clearly struggling against the November chill. Without hesitation, he shrugged off his expensive wool coat, a coat that probably cost more than most people made in a month, and wrapped it around her narrow shoulders. It hung down to her ankles like a royal robe, completely engulfing her tiny frame. "My apartment is just a few blocks away," he said gently, placing a protective hand on her shoulder as they began to walk. "Tommy's been asking about you all morning. He's with his nanny right now, Mrs. Henderson. She's been with our family since Tommy was born. She's just as worried about him as I am, maybe more." Emma clutched the coat around herself as they walked through the upscale downtown district, past boutiques and art galleries she'd only ever seen from the outside. The coat smelled like expensive cologne and success, a world completely foreign to her reality. "Does he still not eat anything?" she asked, though she already knew the answer from the haunted look that never left James's eyes. "Nothing. Yesterday, after we met you, he asked for mommy food 3 more times. But when I tried to give him anything else, even things Sarah used to make that I bought from restaurants," James's jaw tightened with frustration and helplessness. "He just sits there getting smaller every day. The pediatrician says we might have to consider a feeding tube soon if something doesn't change. I can't. I won't let it come to that." They entered a luxury apartment building with marble floors polished to mirror brightness and crystal chandeliers that threw rainbow patterns across the walls. Emma had never seen anything so beautiful, but she tried not to gawk like a tourist as they rode the elevator to the penthouse floor. She could feel the doorman's suspicious gaze following her, probably wondering why a homeless child was accompanying one of the building's most prestigious residents. The elevator climbed smoothly to the 20th floor, and when the doors opened, Emma stepped into a world that seemed like something from a movie. The apartment was enormous, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay, where cargo ships looked like toys in the distance. Designer furniture in soft creams and blues filled rooms larger than the entire shelter where she'd briefly stayed. But despite all its elegance and obvious wealth, Emma could feel the sadness that hung in the air like a heavy fog, pressing down on everything beautiful and making it feel hollow. "Tommy?" James called softly as they entered. "I brought our new friend like I promised." A grey-haired woman emerged from what looked like a library, her kind face etched with deep worry lines. She was wearing a simple dress and apron, and her eyes immediately filled with maternal concern when she saw Emma's small figure swimming in James's coat. "He's in his room, Mr. Mitchell," she said quietly, her voice carrying a soft Irish accent. "He wouldn't even look at the chicken noodle soup I made, his former favorite, just pushed the bowl away and asked for Mommy's soup again." Her eyes grew sad as she studied Emma. "And who is this little angel?" Mrs. Henderson immediately took charge of Emma with the efficiency of someone who'd spent decades caring for others. "Oh, you poor dear, you're freezing. Come, let's get you warmed up properly." But Emma gently pulled back, her eyes focused on the hallway where she knew Tommy was waiting. "Can I see him first? I promised I'd help him today. And promises are really important." James led her down a hallway, lined with family photos that told the story of happier times. Emma caught glimpses of a beautiful woman with long dark hair, laughing in a sun-filled kitchen, flour dusting her hands as she baked with a much younger Tommy, the same woman holding baby Tommy in a hospital room, both of them glowing with joy, the three of them on what looked like a beach vacation, James pushing Tommy on a swing while Sarah captured the moment, her smile radiant with contentment. Each photo was a window into a world that had been perfect until cancer shattered it into pieces. Tommy's room was painted with cheerful jungle animals and filled with expensive toys that looked barely touched. The 4-year-old sat in the far corner, his back to the door, surrounded by books and puzzles that held no interest for him. His small shoulders were hunched in a way that made him look even tinier than he was. "Hi, Tommy," Emma said softly, settling cross-legged on the carpet a respectful distance away. She didn't rush toward him or try to force interaction like the well-meaning doctors had done. "I brought my mommy's special paper like I promised. Do you want to see the magic words?" Slowly, like a flower turning towards sunlight, Tommy rotated to face her. His face was noticeably thinner than yesterday, dark circles under his eyes, making him look like a tiny old man, carrying burdens too heavy for his years. Emma carefully unfolded her precious piece of paper, smoothing it on the soft carpet between them. "This one's really special. My mommy called it sunshine soup because she said it could put actual sunshine right into your heart when you're feeling dark inside." Tommy crawled closer, drawn by the mystery of the worn paper and the gentle authority in Emma's voice. "What does it say?" "Well," Emma began, pointing to the faded pencil marks, "first, you have to introduce yourself to all the ingredients. You tell the carrots how beautiful and bright they are, thank the chicken for being brave and strong, and let the celery know you appreciate how fresh and green it decided to be just for your soup." Tommy's eyes widened slightly. "You talk to food?" "Of course. Food has feelings just like people do. When someone says mean things to you, it hurts your feelings and makes you sad, right? Well, food is the same way. If you ignore it or just grab it without saying thank you, it doesn't want to help you feel better. But if you're kind and grateful, it wants to share all its good energy with you." James knelt beside them, watching this incredible interaction unfold. His business training told him this was nonsense, but Tommy was more engaged than he'd been since Sarah's death. "My mummy did that too," Tommy whispered, a ghost of excitement in his voice. "She said hello, pretty tomatoes, and thank you, strong onions when she cooked. I thought she was just being silly." "She wasn't being silly at all," Emma said seriously. "She was doing the most important part of cooking, putting love into the food. And there's something else really important." She leaned closer conspiratorially. "When you stir the soup, you have to sing songs about all the people you love. That's how the love gets mixed in with all the flavors." Tommy's small hand reached out tentatively to touch the paper. "What kind of songs?" Emma's face brightened with inspiration. "Any songs that make your heart feel warm. Songs about your mommy, songs about your daddy, songs about feeling safe and happy. The soup doesn't care if you're a good singer, it just cares that the songs come from your heart." "Mommy singed about me when she cooked," Tommy said, his voice growing stronger. "She made up songs with my name in them, silly songs that made me laugh." "Perfect. Those are exactly the right kinds of songs. Do you remember any of them?" Tommy thought hard, his brow furrowed with concentration. Then hesitantly, he began to hum a simple melody. Tommy, Tommy, growing strong, Mommy loves you all day long. James felt tears spring to his eyes. It was Sarah's voice he was hearing, the same melody, the same rhythm she'd used during countless dinner preparations. That evening, after Mrs. Henderson had insisted on giving Emma a warm bath and finding some of Tommy's outgrown clothes that might fit her small frame, the little girl sat at the kitchen island feeling more human than she had in months. The soft pajamas smelled like fabric softener and comfort, luxuries she'd almost forgotten existed. Tommy appeared beside her, clutching a stuffed elephant that looked well loved. "Emma," he whispered, glancing toward the living room where his father was finishing a work call. "Will you sleep in my room tonight? I get really scared when it's dark, and Daddy looks sad when I wake up crying." James finished his call and approached them, overhearing the request. His first instinct was to object. This child was still essentially a stranger, after all, despite the miraculous effect she'd had on Tommy. But something in his son's voice, the first request he'd made since Sarah died, stopped the words before they could form. "Would that be okay with you, Emma?" James asked carefully. "We have guest rooms, if you'd prefer your own space." Emma shook her head immediately. "If Tommy needs me close, then that's where I should be. When I was little and scared, my mommy used to say that sometimes the best medicine is just knowing someone who cares is nearby." And they set up a cozy nest on the floor of Tommy's room, using the softest blankets Mrs. Henderson could find, along with pillows that felt like clouds. As they settled in for the night, Tommy spoke from his race car bed, his voice small in the darkness. "Emma, my mommy used to sing me to sleep every night. She said the songs would keep the scary dreams away and fill my head with happy thoughts instead. Do you know any sleep songs?" Emma thought for a moment, then began to hum softly, a melody her own mother had sung during those final weeks in the hospital, when pain medication couldn't chase away all the fear. The tune was simple, but achingly beautiful, filled with love and comfort and the promise that tomorrow could be better than today. "Sunshine in your dreams, little one," she sang quietly, her young voice pure and sweet in the darkness. "Moonbeams keep you safe till morning comes. Angels watch you sleeping. Love surrounds you deep until the sunrise wakes you from your peaceful sleep." From the doorway, James listened with tears streaming down his face. It wasn't exactly the same melody Sarah used to sing, but it was close. So close, it felt like his wife's spirit was somehow present in this remarkable child's voice. The tune carried the same gentle rhythm Sarah had hummed while rocking Tommy as a baby, while cooking dinner, while fighting cancer with grace and courage in those final months. "How do you know that song?" he whispered, stepping into the room. Emma's voice was drowsy but certain. "All mommies know it somehow. Mine taught it to me when I was really little, before I even understood what the words meant. Tommy's mommy probably sang it too, maybe with different words but the same heart. It's the song that connects all the love in the world, the one that reminds us we're never really alone." For the first time in 2 months, Tommy fell asleep without crying, his breathing deep and peaceful as the melody wrapped around him like a lullaby blanket. James stood in the hallway long after both children were breathing deeply, feeling something he'd thought was lost forever, beginning to stir in his heart. This little girl, this brave, impossible child who'd appeared in their lives like an answer to prayers he'd been afraid to voice, had brought music back into their silent house in just 2 days. In the morning, he decided, they would cook together. Emma would teach them to channel Sarah's love through different hands and a different voice, and maybe, somehow, they could all learn to live again instead of just surviving. But as he finally headed to his own empty bedroom, James couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Emma's story than she'd shared. The way she'd known that melody, the wisdom in her 8-year-old eyes, the coincidence of finding them at exactly the moment they needed her most. It felt like more than chance. It felt like destiny, like Sarah herself had somehow sent this child to save the family she'd had to leave behind. The next morning, Emma woke to find Tommy sitting by the large window in his room, staring out at the Seattle skyline with more alertness and focus than he'd shown in weeks. The morning light caught the gold flecks in his brown eyes, eyes that looked so much like his mother's in the photographs lining the hallway. When he saw her stirring from her nest of blankets, he actually smiled, a small, tentative expression that transformed his entire face and made her heart soar with hope. "Good morning, Tommy. Did you sleep better last night?" He nodded eagerly, then paused, his expression growing thoughtful. "Emma, last night I had the most wonderful dream about Mommy. She was in our old kitchen, the one we had before we moved to this big apartment, and she was cooking and singing just like she used to. She looked so happy and healthy, not sick like at the end." Emma sat up, immediately interested. Dreams about lost parents were sacred things, not to be dismissed or minimized. "What did she say in the dream?" she said. Tommy's voice grew quiet with wonder. "She said you were going to teach Daddy her songs, but in a different way. She said sometimes love has to find new voices to keep going, and that she picked you special to help us remember how to be happy again." Emma felt goosebumps rise along her arms. "That sounds like a very important dream, Tommy. I think your mommy was telling you something real." James appeared in the doorway, already dressed for what should have been another day at the office, but carrying a cup of coffee and looking more rested than he had in months. Dark circles still shadowed his eyes, but there was something different about his posture, less defeated, more hopeful. "Actually," he announced, "I called my office early this morning and cleared my entire schedule. I'm taking the day off. I want to learn how to make this sunshine soup. And I want to learn the right way, with songs and gratitude and all the special words Emma's mother wrote down." An hour later, the three of them stood in the pristine kitchen that Sarah had designed with such love and care, but that James had barely used since her death. The granite countertops gleamed under pendant lights, and every appliance was top of the line, but the room had felt cold and lifeless for months, until now. Emma had carefully laid out her mother's recipe paper on the counter, its worn edges and faded pencil marks looking humble but precious against the expensive surface. Mrs. Henderson had gathered all the necessary ingredients, arranging them like an artist's palette. Bright orange carrots, crisp celery stalks, a whole chicken that looked farm fresh, herbs that filled the air with earthy promise. "Now remember," Emma explained with the seriousness of a master chef instructing students, "cooking isn't just about following directions. It's about making friends with your food and inviting love into every single step. Tommy, pick up a carrot and tell it something nice, something that comes from your heart." Tommy giggled, the first genuine laughter James had heard from him since Sarah's death, a sound so beautiful it made his chest ache with relief. "Hello, carrot. You're very orange and pretty, and I bet you grew really hard to be so perfect for our soup." Wonderful. Now, Daddy, you try with the celery. Don't think too much about it, just say what feels right." James felt absolutely ridiculous talking to vegetables, but the hope shining in his son's eyes made him willing to try anything. Hello, celery. Thank you for being so fresh and green and for growing in the sunshine so you could help us make something special today." Emma nodded approvingly. "Perfect. You're both naturals at this. Now we start the actual cooking, but here's the most important part. Tommy, can you remember any of the songs your mommy used to sing while she cooked? Even just humming the tunes would be perfect." Tommy closed his eyes, concentrating hard. Then he began to hum hesitantly, his small voice carrying a melody that made James's breath catch. It was the same tune Emma had sung the night before, but with Sarah's rhythm, Sarah's pauses, Sarah's joy woven through every note. Slowly, words began to emerge. "Stirring, stirring, love goes in. Warm my baby from within, carrots dancing, celery too, making soup for me and you." James's breath caught completely. It was exactly how Sarah used to sing while cooking their Sunday dinners, her voice filling the kitchen with warmth and contentment. "That's it. Emma clapped her hands in delight. That's your mommy's love song. Now we all sing together while we cook, and the soup will taste like love because we're putting love into making it. As they chopped and stirred and sang together, something truly magical began to happen. The kitchen filled with warmth that had nothing to do with the stove's heat. Tommy helped measure ingredients with careful precision. James sang off-key but with his whole heart, and Emma conducted them like a tiny orchestra conductor, keeping them all in harmony. When the soup was finally ready, filling the kitchen with an aroma that smelled like comfort and home, Tommy took his first voluntary bite of food in 2 months. His eyes widened with surprise and joy. "It tastes like Mommy's love," he whispered in wonder, and then promptly ate an entire bowl without stopping. James was so overcome with relief and gratitude that he had to sit down, his hands shaking as the weight of 2 months' worry finally began to lift from his shoulders. "Emma, I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've given me my son back. You've saved our family." But even as the words left his mouth, his phone rang with an intrusive electronic chirp. Mrs. Henderson answered it in the next room, and James could hear her voice growing concerned, then alarmed. She returned to the kitchen with a deeply troubled expression, her face pale with worry. "Mr. Mitchell, that was someone from Child Protective Services. They're conducting an active search for a missing child. An 8-year-old girl named Emma who disappeared from foster care 3 weeks ago. They're asking all the hospitals, shelters and community centers to keep an eye out. They said she's considered at risk, and they're very worried about her safety." Emma went completely still, her spoon halfway to her mouth, her face suddenly guarded. James looked from Mrs. Henderson to Emma, his mind racing with implications and questions he wasn't sure he wanted answered. "Emma, is there something you need to tell us?" Emma set down her spoon with trembling hands, her eyes darting between James and Mrs. Henderson like a cornered animal calculating escape routes. The warmth that had filled the kitchen moments before suddenly felt suffocating, and the beautiful apartment that had seemed like a sanctuary now felt like a trap. "I didn't mean to lie," she whispered, her voice so small it was barely audible. I couldn't go back there, not to that place." Her shoulders began to shake, and tears she'd been holding back for weeks finally spilled over. "The foster home was supposed to be temporary, just until they found me a real family. But there were so many kids and never enough food. And the man who ran it," she wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking even smaller than her 8 years. "He said things, did things, made some of the older girls do things they didn't want to do. When I tried to tell the social worker, she said I was making up stories for attention. She said problem children always blame others for their situations." James felt rage building in his chest, not at Emma, but at a system that had failed this remarkable child so completely. "Emma, you're safe here. We won't let anyone hurt you." "But they'll make me go back," Emma said, her voice breaking completely. "They always make kids go back. And if they find out I ran away, they'll send me somewhere worse. They said if I caused any more trouble, I'd end up in juvenile detention until I turned 18. Tommy, who had been listening with wide eyes, suddenly spoke up with more determination than James had heard from him since Sarah's death. "Daddy, we can't let them take Emma away. She saved me. She brought Mommy's songs back. We have to protect her now." Mrs. Henderson, who had raised 3 children of her own and understood the complexities of the system, spoke carefully. "Mr. Mitchell, there are legal procedures we need to follow, but perhaps we could explore other options. Emma clearly needs a stable home, and she's done more for Tommy in 3 days than months of therapy achieved." James's mind raced through possibilities. His wealth and connections could open doors, but Emma's situation was complicated. She wasn't just a runaway. She was a ward of the state, with a documented history of behavioral problems, according to her file. "Emma," he said gently, kneeling to her eye level, "I want you to listen to me very carefully. I'm going to call my attorney, the best family lawyer in Seattle. We're going to figure out a way to keep you safe and keep you here, if that's what you want. But I need you to trust me and be completely honest about everything that happened." Emma looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of deception or false promises. She'd learned not to trust adults easily. But something in James's expression reminded her of her own father before grief had broken him. "There's something else," she said quietly. "Something I haven't told you about why I was really at that coffee shop when I found you and Tommy." James waited patiently, sensing this was important. "I wasn't just looking for food, I was looking for him, for Tommy." She pulled a newspaper clipping from her jacket pocket, worn from handling. It was an article about Sarah Mitchell's death, including a photo of the family. "I saw this article 3 weeks ago when someone left a newspaper on a park bench. When I read about how Tommy stopped eating after his mommy died, I knew I had to find him." Mrs. Henderson gasped softly. "You've been looking for us specifically?" Emma nodded. "My mommy always said her recipes were meant to be shared with children who needed them. When I read about Tommy, I felt like my mommy was telling me he was the one I was supposed to help. I've been watching your building for days, waiting for the right moment." James stared at this extraordinary child who had orchestrated their meeting with the wisdom of someone far beyond her years. "Emma, that's incredible. But how did you know we'd be at that specific coffee shop?" "I followed you from your building that morning. I could see how sad you both were, and I knew Tommy wasn't eating by how thin he looked. When you went into the cafe, I could tell through the window that you were both crying. That's when I knew it was time." The phone rang again, piercing the emotional moment. Mrs. Henderson answered with a worried expression, then covered the receiver. "It's Child Protective Services again. They want to speak with you directly, Mr. Mitchell. They said they have reason to believe Emma might be in this area." Emma's face went white with terror. "They found me. They're going to take me away." James stood up, his jaw set with determination. "Not if I have anything to say about it." James took the phone with the confidence of a man accustomed to high-stakes negotiations, but his protective instincts toward Emma made his voice sharp with barely controlled anger. "This is James Mitchell," he said curtly into the receiver. "Mr. Mitchell, this is Sandra Williams from Child Protective Services. We're conducting a search for a missing child, and we have reports that you may have had contact with her. 8-year-old Emma Patterson, brown hair, small for her age, missing from foster care for 3 weeks." James looked at Emma, who was pressed against Tommy's side, both children clinging to each other with desperate fear. "And what makes you think I would have information about this child? We've been canvassing the upscale neighborhoods where a homeless child might seek help. Your building's doorman mentioned seeing you with a young girl yesterday. We need to speak with you immediately." "I see. And what exactly happened to this child while she was in your care that made her feel running away was safer than staying in the system?" There was a pause. "Mr. Mitchell, I don't appreciate your tone. We're trying to locate a vulnerable child who could be in danger on the streets. If you have any information—" "Ms. Williams," James interrupted, his voice taking on the commanding tone he used in boardrooms, "I'm going to stop you right there. Before we continue this conversation, I want you to know that I'm recording this call, and my attorney will be present for any further discussions. If you want to continue, you can call back in 2 hours." He hung up without waiting for a response. Emma stared at him with amazement. You hung up on them. Won't that make them more suspicious?" "Probably," James admitted, "but it will also give us time to get proper legal representation. Emma, I need you to tell me everything about the foster home, names, addresses, specific incidents. My lawyer needs to know exactly what we're dealing with." Over the next hour, Emma reluctantly shared details that made James's blood boil. The foster father, Robert Hendricks, ran what was essentially a profit center disguised as childcare. 23 children crammed into a house meant for a family of 4. Minimal food, no supervision, and inappropriate behavior that the overwhelmed social workers either didn't see or chose to ignore. "The worst part," Emma said quietly, "was watching the little ones cry for their real families while nobody cared enough to comfort them. Some of those kids had been there for years, just forgotten." Mrs. Henderson wiped tears from her eyes. That's no way for any child to live. Tommy, who had been listening intently, suddenly spoke up. Daddy, if Emma has to go back there, couldn't we adopt her, like people adopt puppies from the shelter? The innocence of the question hit James like a physical blow. It's more complicated than that, son, but he looked at Emma, who was staring at him with cautious hope. But maybe not impossible. James's phone buzzed with a text from his attorney, confirming he'd be there within the hour. But before he could respond, the building's intercom crackled to life. Mr. Mitchell, the doorman's voice came through, tense with anxiety. There are 2 people here from Child Protective Services. They say they need to speak with you immediately about an urgent matter involving a missing child. Emma bolted upright, terror written across her face. They're here. They're going to take me away right now. James moved to the intercom. Tell them my attorney will be here shortly, and they can wait in the lobby until then. Sir, they're saying they have a court order for immediate removal of any minor children found on the premises who match the description of the missing child. Emma was now crying openly, clinging to Tommy, who was also beginning to panic. Please don't let them take me. Please. I'll be good. I'll do anything you want. Just don't make me go back there. James felt something fierce and protective rise in his chest, the same feeling he'd had when Tommy was born, when Sarah was diagnosed, when his family needed him to be strong. Emma, listen to me. I promise you, I will not let them take you back to a place where you're not safe. Do you trust me? Through her tears, Emma nodded. Good. Mrs. Henderson, take both children to Tommy's room and lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except me. Emma, remember what you told Tommy about his mother's love staying in the food? Well, sometimes grown-ups have to be brave to protect the people they love. That's what I'm going to do right now. As Mrs. Henderson guided the children away, James straightened his tie and prepared for the most important negotiation of his life. But just as he reached for the intercom to let the social workers up, his phone rang with a call that would change everything. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but when he answered, the voice on the other end made his blood run cold. Is this James Mitchell? This is Detective Ray Martinez with Seattle PD. We need to talk to you immediately about Emma Patterson. We have new information about her case that changes everything. James gripped the phone tighter, his heart pounding. Detective Martinez, I'm listening. Mr. Mitchell, we've just arrested Robert Hendricks, the foster parent responsible for Emma Patterson. We have evidence of systematic abuse and neglect involving multiple children in his care. Emma wasn't just running away. She was fleeing a dangerous situation that we're now treating as a criminal matter. Relief and fury warred in James's chest. What kind of evidence? I can't give you all the details over the phone, but we have testimony from several other children, financial records showing fraud, and physical evidence of inappropriate conduct. Emma's allegations, which were dismissed by her caseworker, are now central to our investigation. We need to speak with her, but as a witness, not a runaway. James heard the intercom buzz again. The social workers downstairs were getting impatient. Detective, there are CPS workers here right now trying to take her back into the system. What are my options? Don't let them take her anywhere until I get there. Emma is a key witness in an active criminal investigation, and her safety is our primary concern. I'm 10 minutes away. James immediately called to Mrs. Henderson. Change of plans. Keep the children where they are, but we may have some good news coming. He pressed the intercom button. This is James Mitchell. I understand you're here about Emma Patterson. However, I've just been contacted by Seattle Police Detective Martinez regarding this case. The child is now considered a protected witness in a criminal investigation. You'll need to coordinate with the detective before taking any action. There was a long pause. Mr. Mitchell, we have our orders, and I have mine from the Seattle Police Department. Detective Martinez will be here in 10 minutes to explain the situation. You're welcome to wait in the lobby. James hung up and went to Tommy's room, where he found Emma teaching Tommy a clapping game to distract him from the stress. Her resilience amazed him. Even in her moment of greatest fear, she was taking care of his son. Emma, he said gently. "I have some news. The police have arrested the man who was hurting you and the other children at the foster home. You're not in trouble. You're a hero for speaking up about what was happening." Emma's eyes widened. "They arrested Mr. Hendricks. Really? Really? And Detective Martinez wants to talk to you, but as someone who helped solve a crime, not as someone who did anything wrong." For the first time since the phone calls began, Emma smiled. "Does that mean I don't have to go back there?" "It means we have options now, legal options. And Emma, there's something I want to ask you, but I want you to think about it carefully." Tommy bounced up excitedly. "Are you going to ask her what I think you're going to ask her?" James knelt down, so he was at eye level with both children. "Emma, these past few days, you've become part of our family. You saved Tommy, you brought music back to our home, and you've shown more courage and wisdom than many adults I know. I know this is all happening very fast, but how would you feel about staying with us? Not just for a few days, but permanently?" Emma stared at him in shock. "You mean, like a real family? Forever?" "Like a real family, forever. I'll need to file adoption papers, and there will be legal processes to follow. But my attorney thinks we have a strong case, especially with the criminal charges against your former foster placement." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but for the first time, they were tears of joy. "You really want me, even though I'm just a street kid with nothing to offer?" James felt his own eyes getting misty. "Emma, you saved my son's life. You brought love back into our home when I thought it was gone forever. You have everything to offer." Tommy jumped up and down. "Say yes, Emma, say yes. We can be brother and sister. And you can teach me more cooking songs, and we can take care of Daddy together." Just then, the doorbell rang. James checked the security monitor. A man in a detective's badge stood outside, along with the two social workers who looked significantly less confident than they had earlier. "That's Detective Martinez. Emma, are you ready to tell your story to someone who will actually listen and believe you?" Emma squared her small shoulders with determination. "I'm ready. And Mr. James, thank you for being the first grown-up who wanted to protect me instead of control me." As James opened the door to let the detective in, he couldn't help but think about Sarah and how proud she would be of the family they were building. Emma had come into their lives like an answer to prayers, but maybe, just maybe, they were the answer to hers as well. Detective Martinez was a kind-faced man in his 40s who immediately put Emma at ease. "Hello, Emma. I've heard you're a very brave girl who helped us discover some important information about children who needed protection." But as the detective began to explain the situation to the social workers, his phone rang. His expression grew serious as he listened. Then he looked directly at James with an expression of surprise and concern. "Mr. Mitchell, that was my partner. We've discovered something unexpected about Emma's background that you need to know immediately." Detective Martinez looked directly at Emma with gentle but serious eyes. "Emma, we've been investigating your case, and we discovered something about your family history that changes everything. Your father, the one you thought abandoned you after your mother died, he didn't just disappear because he couldn't cope with grief." Emma's face went pale. "What do you mean?" 3 months after your mother passed away, your father was in a serious car accident. He's been in a specialized care facility in Portland, recovering from a traumatic brain injury. He's been asking about you every day since he regained consciousness 6 months ago, but the hospital and social services lost track of your location when you entered foster care. The room fell completely silent. James felt the ground shift beneath him as he realized what this meant. "My daddy is alive." Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "Not only alive, but fighting every day to get well enough to take care of you again. The doctors say he's made remarkable progress. His speech has returned, his memory is improving, and his motor functions are nearly back to normal. He's been working with social workers trying to locate you." Emma began to shake. He wants me back?" "Emma, your father never stopped wanting you. When he woke up and learned you'd been placed in foster care, he started rehabilitation therapy with a determination the doctors had never seen. He's been working 2 jobs from his hospital bed, physical therapy to get his body back, and legal advocacy to get his daughter back. James felt his heart breaking and soaring simultaneously. This was wonderful news for Emma, but it meant losing her just when she'd become part of their family. "There's more," Detective Martinez continued. "Your father has been following news stories about Tommy's situation. When he saw the article about a boy who wouldn't eat after losing his mother, he told his social worker that it sounded like something his Emma would want to help with. He's been praying you would find your way to a family that needed your special gift with cooking and caring for people." Emma looked confused. "He knew about Tommy?" "He didn't know specifically, but he knew you. He told everyone at the hospital that his daughter had a gift for helping sad children feel better, that your mother had taught you special ways to cook with love. He said if you were out there somewhere, you'd find someone who needed that gift." Tommy, who had been listening intently, suddenly spoke up. "Emma, your daddy sounds really nice and really smart." James struggled with conflicting emotions. He'd fallen in love with the idea of Emma as his daughter, but how could he stand in the way of a father who had fought so hard to recover and reclaim his child? "When can I see him?" Emma asked, her voice trembling with hope and fear. "We can arrange a video call today, and if you're both comfortable, we can arrange a visit tomorrow. But Emma, there's something important you need to understand. Your father knows that you've been through trauma, and he wants whatever is best for you, even if that means taking time to rebuild your relationship." Emma looked at James with tears in her eyes. "Mr. James, I'm so confused. I want to see my daddy, but I don't want to leave you and Tommy. You saved me too." James knelt down and took her hands. "Emma, the most important thing is that you get to choose what feels right for you. No one is going to force you into anything. Maybe there's a way for all of us to be in your life." Detective Martinez smiled. "Actually, that's exactly what your father was hoping. He asked if the family that had been taking care of you might be willing to meet him. He said he wanted to thank them personally for protecting his daughter when he couldn't." Mrs. Henderson, who had been wiping tears throughout the conversation, spoke up. "This child has brought so much healing to this household. If her father is half as special as she is, I think we're about to witness something beautiful." Tommy tugged on Emma's sleeve. "Emma, maybe your daddy can come have dinner with us. You can make sunshine soup for everyone, and we can teach him the songs, and he can tell us stories about when you were little." Emma looked around at all the faces surrounding her, people who had shown her more love and protection in 4 days than she'd experienced in 2 years on her own. "Can we really do that? Can my daddy meet my new family?" Detective Martinez nodded. "Emma, your father's first words when he woke up were, 'Where is my Emma? And who is taking care of her?' I think he's going to be very grateful to meet the people who answered that question." But just as Emma was beginning to smile, Detective Martinez's radio crackled with an urgent message that made his expression change dramatically. "Detective Martinez, we need you back at the station immediately. There's been a development in the Hendricks case that requires Emma's immediate attention. We've discovered something about the other children that changes the entire scope of the investigation." Detective Martinez's expression grew grave as he listened to the message. "Emma, we need to talk about something important. The other children from the foster home. We've discovered that several of them have no family to return to, and they're going to need safe places to stay while we sort out their situations." Emma's eyes widened with understanding. "The little ones? The ones who cried at night?" "Yes. There's a 5-year-old named Marcus who's been asking for you specifically. He told our child psychologist that you used to sing to him when he had nightmares, and that you shared your food with him when there wasn't enough. He's scared and doesn't trust any of the adults trying to help him." James felt something shift in his chest. "How many children are we talking about?" 7 children who are now in emergency placement, but 3 of them, Marcus, his 6-year-old sister Lily, and a 4-year-old named Carlos, are having severe emotional reactions. They're not eating, not speaking, showing signs of trauma that our usual foster families aren't equipped to handle. Emma stood up straighter, her voice filled with determination. They need the cooking songs. They need someone who understands what it feels like to be scared and alone. Tommy looked up at his father with the innocent wisdom that had become familiar. "Daddy, remember when Emma helped me? Maybe she could help them too. Maybe we could help them too." James looked around the room, at Emma, whose eyes were bright with purpose, at Tommy, who was more alive than he'd been in months, at Mrs. Henderson, who was nodding encouragingly, at Detective Martinez, who was watching this conversation with interest. "Detective, what would be required if we wanted to help these children? Not permanently, necessarily, but as emergency placement while they heal." "Mr. Mitchell, you'd need to apply for emergency foster certification, which, given your background check and financial stability, could be expedited. But are you sure you're prepared for that level of responsibility? These children have been through severe trauma." Emma looked at James with hope and determination. "Mr. James, I know how to help scared kids. My mummy taught me, and I learned more on the streets. Food and songs and feeling safe, that's what they need most." James thought about his enormous apartment, his resources, his ability to hire additional help. But more than that, he thought about the transformation he'd witnessed in his own son, and the light that had returned to their home through Emma's presence. "Mrs. Henderson, what do you think? Could we manage 3 more children temporarily?" Mrs. Henderson straightened up with the efficiency of someone who'd spent decades caring for others. "Mr. Mitchell, this apartment is large enough for a small army, and I've raised children through worse situations than this. If Emma is willing to help, and if these little ones need us, then we have a duty to step up." Tommy was practically bouncing with excitement. "We could be like a big family. Emma could teach everyone the cooking songs, and I could share my toys, and maybe they could help me build the big puzzle I've been too sad to finish." Detective Martinez looked impressed. "This is highly unusual, but given the circumstances and Emma's relationship with these children, it might be exactly what they need. However, there's one more thing you should know." He paused, checking his notes. "Emma's father has been following this case from his hospital bed. When he learned about the other children's situation, he asked if he could help too. He's a construction supervisor, was before his accident, and he's offered to do repairs and improvements on any facility that takes in these children. He wants to contribute to their care, even while he's still recovering." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "My daddy wants to help the other kids too. Your father said, and I quote, 'My Emma has a gift for healing broken hearts. If she's found people who understand that gift, then I want to support whatever family has supported her.'" James felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening. In 4 days, his family had grown from 2 broken people to potentially 6 children who needed love and healing. "Detective, when can we meet Emma's father, and when can we meet these children?" "I can arrange the video call with Emma's father this afternoon, and if everyone agrees, we could have the children here by evening. But Mr. Mitchell, I need you to understand, this isn't just about providing a temporary home. These children will need therapy, medical care, educational support, and more patience than you can imagine." Emma stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. When she turned back to the room, her expression was filled with quiet determination. "Mr. James, Tommy, Mrs. Henderson, you saved me when I thought no one cared if I lived or died. Now we have a chance to save other kids who feel the same way I did. If my daddy approves, and if you're willing, I think we should try." James looked at his son, who was nodding eagerly, then at Mrs. Henderson, who was already mentally calculating sleeping arrangements and meal plans. "All right then. Let's do this. Let's build the family that all these children deserve." But as Detective Martinez reached for his phone to begin making arrangements, it rang with an incoming call that made his face turn serious. "Detective Martinez, what? Are you sure? We'll be right there." He hung up and looked at the group with concern. That was the hospital in Portland. "Emma's father has just made an unexpected decision that's going to change all of our plans." Detective Martinez's phone call had left everyone in the room holding their breath. Emma gripped Tommy's hand tightly, her face pale with worry. "What kind of decision?" Emma whispered. "Your father has just checked himself out of the hospital against medical advice. He's driving to Seattle right now. He said he couldn't wait another day to see his daughter, and when he learned about the other children who needed help, he decided he was strong enough to be part of the solution immediately." Emma's eyes widened. "He's coming here, today? He should arrive within the next 2 hours. But Emma, there's something else. He's not coming alone." James felt his chest tighten. "What do you mean?" "Emma's father has been working with a non-profit organization that specializes in trauma recovery for children. He's bringing Dr. Sarah Chen, a child psychologist who has experience with exactly the kind of situation these foster children are facing. He wants to make sure every child gets the help they need." Emma sat down heavily, overwhelmed by the rapid developments. "My daddy, he's really coming, and he's bringing help for the other kids." Detective Martinez smiled. "Emma, your father has spent 6 months in recovery thinking about nothing but getting back to you and making sure you're safe and happy. When he learned you'd been helping other children who went through trauma like yours, he said it was exactly what your mother would have wanted you to do." Tommy looked confused. "Emma, are you happy or scared?" "Oh, both," Emma admitted. "I've dreamed about seeing my daddy again every night for 2 years. But what if I'm different now? What if he doesn't like who I've become?" Mrs. Henderson moved to sit beside Emma, her voice gentle but firm. "Child, love doesn't work that way. Your father isn't coming to judge who you've become. He's coming to celebrate that you survived and found your way to people who cherish you." James knelt in front of Emma. "Emma, no matter what happens with your father, you will always be part of our family now. You've changed our lives forever, and that bond doesn't disappear just because your situation changes." An hour later, James's apartment had been transformed into a preparation zone. Mrs. Henderson was cooking enough food for a small army. Tommy was arranging his toys in the living room so the other children would feel welcome. And Emma was carefully writing out copies of her mother's recipes so each child could have their own set of magic words. When the intercom buzzed, Emma froze completely. "Emma," James said gently, "are you ready?" She nodded, though her hands were shaking. Tommy took one of her hands, and James took the other as they walked to the door. When James opened it, they saw Detective Martinez, accompanied by a man who looked like an older version of Emma. The same warm brown eyes, the same determined chin, but with graying hair, and the careful movements of someone still recovering from serious injury. Beside him stood an Asian woman with kind eyes carrying a medical bag. "Emma," the man said, his voice breaking with emotion. "Daddy," Emma whispered. David Patterson dropped to his knees, and Emma ran into his arms. They held each other and cried for several minutes, while everyone else in the room wiped away their own tears. "My brave girl," David whispered into her hair. "I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you. I'm so sorry you had to be strong all by yourself." "I wasn't by myself, Daddy. I found Tommy and Mr. James and Mrs. Henderson, and they took care of me. And now we're going to take care of other kids who need help." David looked up at James with tears in his eyes. "Mr. Mitchell, I will never be able to repay you for protecting my daughter when I couldn't." James helped them both stand. "David, your daughter saved my family. She brought my son back to life and taught us how to love again. We're the ones who should be thanking you for raising such an extraordinary child." Dr. Chen stepped forward. "I hate to interrupt this beautiful reunion, but we have 3 very scared children waiting downstairs who need to see that Emma is safe and happy before they'll trust any of us." Emma wiped her eyes and stood straighter. "They're here, Marcus and Lily and Carlos. They're in the lobby with a social worker. Marcus hasn't spoken since yesterday." But when he heard Emma's name, he perked up for the first time. Emma looked around the room at her father, at James and Tommy, at Mrs. Henderson, and at Dr. Chen. "Are we really going to do this? Are we really going to be one big family that takes care of each other?" And David Patterson smiled, the first real smile he'd had since his wife died 3 years ago. Emma, your mother always said that families aren't just about blood. They're about people who choose to love and protect each other. I think she'd be very proud of the family you've built. James nodded. We're going to need more bedrooms, more high chairs, probably more patience than any of us knew we had. But yes, Emma, we're going to do this together. Tommy tugged on Emma's sleeve. Emma, can we go get the little kids now? I want to show them the kitchen where we make the singing soup. Emma looked at her father. Daddy, are you strong enough for this? David Patterson stood up straighter, his eyes clear and determined. Emma, for the past 6 months, the only thing that kept me fighting to get better was the thought of taking care of you again. Now I find out you've been taking care of others who needed you. I've never been more ready for anything in my life. And so, 20 minutes later, the penthouse apartment that had been silent with grief just a week before was filled with the voices of 6 children. 3 adults who had committed to loving them, and Dr. Chen, who was already planning therapy sessions that would help heal young hearts. As Emma stood in the kitchen, teaching 5-year-old Marcus how to say hello to carrots, while Tommy helped 6-year-old Lily measure ingredients, and 4-year-old Carlos giggled at Mrs. Henderson's funny faces, James realized that sometimes the most broken families become the strongest ones. His phone buzzed with a text from his lawyer. Adoption papers are ready for all children when you are. Family court judge says she's never seen a more compelling case for emergency family formation. James looked around his kitchen, now filled with children's laughter and the smell of sunshine soup, and thought about Sarah. She would have loved this chaos, this beautiful noise, this house full of children who needed love and had found it in the most unexpected way. Emma caught his eye and smiled, the radiant smile of a child who had learned that sometimes when you save someone else, you end up saving yourself too. Outside, snow began to fall gently on Seattle, covering the city in a blanket of new beginnings.